And we're live! Welcome to Pitchware's live show with these awesome YA mentors. Tonight you're in for a real treat. These people are fabulous and they can't wait to tell you all about themselves and answer your questions. So get them ready on Ask Mentor, the hashtag on Twitter. I'm Nikki Roberti. I'll be your host tonight. I'm also a YA mentor. But we're going to start the discussion with an introduction of who these other lovely people are. And we're going to start with Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie Holmberg. I am the author of the Paper Magician series, followed by Frost, and I just had an adult book come out called Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet. I am represented by Marlene Stringer, and I am looking for YA and NA fantasy, especially if it has a romantic subplot, or if it's romantic fantasy, and I'm also looking for historical romance.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm a YA mentor. I am repped by Mary C. Moore of Kimberly Cameron and Associates. I am also looking for historical fantasy, historical fiction, kudos if it has romance, and science fiction.
Hi, I am Jenny. I am repped by Stacy Glick. She's actually an agent this year in Pitchwork, so I'm really excited about that. My debut is coming out from Tor in the spring. It's a historical retelling. And I might have two little somethings I'm not supposed to be talking about that are coming out in 2018, which are non-historical. I mostly read historical retellings and fantasy, so that's pretty much what I'm really hoping that lands in my inbox.
Hi, I'm Karen. I am represented by Rosemary Stamola, and my debut, One of Us is Lying, is coming out next summer from Delacorte Press with a second book following in 2018, and I am looking for contemporary. That's what my debut is. I read a lot in that area, and I also read and write on the lighter side of speculative fiction, so looking for some fantasy, science fiction, and magical realism as well.
Hi, my name is Kirby Addis. I'm actually co-mentoring with Monica Bustamante Wagner, who was actually my mentor last year. I am an intern to a fabulous literary agent, and this year Monica and I are looking for basically all YA fantasy as long as it has a romantic subplot, but we're not looking for anything dystopian or paranormal or anything like that.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm co-mentoring this year with Kat Scully. I'm represented by Carrie Pastorito of Prospect Agency. This year, Kat and I are looking for anything that is science fiction, fantasy, horror, dark contemporary, or anything with LGBTQ main characters.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm represented by Rachel Brooks of L. Perkins, and my debut young adult fantasy comes out next summer with the sequel to follow the next summer. I mentored last year, and I'm looking for basically the same thing, young adult fantasy and science fiction and sort of that whole umbrella. So.
Hi, I'm MK England. I'm co-mentoring this year with Jamie Pacton. We were both 2015 mentees turned 2016 mentors. I'm represented by Barbara Poel of the Irene Goodman Literary Agency, and I write YA space opera and LGBT plus contemporary. And Jamie and I are looking for all of your high-concept, rollicking adventure stories full of heart and awesome world building in any genre, except for things like horror and literary and anything that's really slow or quiet or dark.
Hi, I'm Megan, and I'm represented by Mandy Hubbard at Emerald City Literary. And this year I'm co-mentoring with Katie, the wonderful Katie, and we are looking for the dark and creepy stuff. We want the horror and the Southern Gothic and the creepy dark fantasy type stuff, but we're looking for more fantasy that's not world specific. We want more of like the character driven stuff, and we are definitely also in it for the romance, so that's you get extra points for that.
And I'm Nikki Roberti, represented by Susie Townsend, and I'm looking for light sci-fi, light fantasy, spec fic, historical fiction, and contemporary that doesn't focus on romance. And that's just what we're looking for, but there's a lot more to us, and you're going to learn a lot tonight. So remember, if you have any questions, go over to Twitter and type in the hashtag AskMentor. our wonderful Twitter captain tonight, the amazing Limar, is moderating the feed for us, and she'll be trying to shoot your questions over. We've been getting a lot the past couple nights, so we might not be able to get to them all, but other mentors will totally be able to go on and answer, and some of these guys will go on and answer after the show as well. So, to kick us off, I'm going to start with a question we got earlier anonymously. And this question is about, well, it says, if you got a clean, error-free sub that you loved, but found out the mentee was dyslexic and gets a CP to check the manuscript before subs only for punctuation, thus in the 2 months go between, edits, emails, etc. may have some punctuation errors, would that be a problem for you? Do you think that grammar errors equal laziness, or can you see past that? Does anyone want to take that question away?
I can. I'm dyslexic myself, and I know quite a few authors that are dyslexic, and I think that as someone who's dyslexic, we worry a lot more about punctuation than most people, and I don't think that it'd be a problem. I personally wouldn't mind at all, and I'd be happy to have a dyslexic mentee. I'd be happy to teach them some tricks that I learned along the way that really helped me out, but I just really want to stress that anyone with a learning disability like dyslexia shouldn't be too worried about that or too stressed out about it, because I think we worry about it a lot more than the average person does. And it's usually not as bad as we think it is.
Awesome. And you know, I just want to say, as an author too, I don't know any author who doesn't make mistakes at any stage, regardless of learning disability or not. So that should be not something you're worried about. And it's great you have a CP, because that's probably one of the most valuable resources that authors should be using. So that's great that you have one now. Does anyone else want to speak on that before we move on to the next question? Cool. So the next question is from Annette Christie from Twitter, and that is, for the YA mentors interested in dark and edgy manuscripts, would something angsty but ultimately hopeful feel too fluffy? Anyone want to take that away?
I will.
I can.
We'll start with Megan.
When I was talking to Katie about the darker stuff, we specifically mentioned that we didn't want, the fluff. And to us, it was definitely the more like the meaning of true friendship, or the stuff where you get to the end and their ultimate goal was to have the perfect prom. That is what we are not looking for. We're looking for stuff like, one of the things that we talked about was If I Stay, where it's very much the do I live or die type stuff, or the big life dark problems. That is more what we were looking for. So it would depend on exactly how hopeful it was, I guess.
And I could just jump in, because I'm looking for dark and edgy as well, but not exclusively. I kind of like books that take on serious issues, but sometimes do it with a lighter tone or some darker humor. And I do think that, a hopeful resolution, as long as it's realistic to the characters and the world that you've built, can work really well. So it's not an issue for me if things are resolved, or if you kind of start in one direction and people grow and change, and it's hard and it's dark for a while, but they ultimately come out feeling better about themselves at the end. As long as you maintain the truth of the story, I think that works fine.
Yeah, Kat and I are also really looking for dark, edgy, contemporary, fantasy, sci-fi, horror, any of that. And I really agree with what Megan and Karen just said. But I also think that, especially in horror, a lot of it does end with a hopeful note. Like, if you read Stephen King, a lot of his stuff has at least a glimmer of hope at the end. And it's kind of really devastating to read an entire manuscript or book that is completely dark and ends with no hope. So I think it goes down to execution, and as long as it's not too fluffy in the end, it'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This next question is from Maggie Flores. And it is, I've been told a multi-POV manuscript should have a single POV query with mention of the fact that it's multi-POV. Is that right? And
I could take this because I've written multi-POV. My debut has 4 people, first person, and they all have equal weight within the manuscript. So when I queried, I did not pick one and use their point of view. I mentioned them all briefly, but then I really focused on the plot and how they all came together, and you know, kind of the stakes and the conflict that arose for them jointly. So there was not a lot of backstory about any of them in particular. There was sort of one sentence, who they are, and then a real focus into what happened to the four of them.
That's interesting. That's really cool. 4 POVs. That sounds really like, and I can't wait to read that.
It was challenging.
Yeah, I just want to add, as someone who reads queries, like an interns for an agent, when you have a multi-POV query, I like the ones where it's, as Karen said, instead of attempting to focus on all of them in a larger paragraph, because then you don't get the real focus of the plot. So it's either going to focus on one or slight focus on all of them, but with the major plot points.
Awesome. Anyone else want to speak on multi-POVs? So since we're on queries, I thought maybe this might be a good time to ask you guys, what is the #1 thing that you look for when you're reading a query, and even the first chapter, since that's what is submitted with Pitch Wars? And I think we should all answer this question. And let's start with Isabel.
Hi. Okay, so in a query, I'm looking for, I really want to connect with the character, and I think that you need to have what the character wants, and then from there, what is standing in the way of the character getting that. So it's those two things, and then bringing in the stakes. So if the character does not get this, what happens? And I would say that translates into the first chapter as well. Like, I'm looking to really connect with the character in the first chapter. I'm not looking for a slow start. I'd like to get just pushed into the world and to not be able to stop reading, and to just start off with the story and to be really close to the character.
I'm feeling pretty similar with what Isabel was saying. For me, the biggest thing for both the query and for the first chapter is clarity. I sometimes feel that people think having a little bit of vagueness is intriguing, but for me it really causes confusion, and it kind of causes disconnection from there. So I really want to feel grounded in what is going on, who the characters are, as Isabel said, like what they want, their motivations, and what's at stake.
You know, one of the things I love is voice in a query. If you can, it's sort of like the icing on the cake. You have to have all the other stuff, but if you can also work your voice in on top, it really pulls me in, and then you're kind of ready for that first chapter.
Before we go further, we are getting some feedback. So if we could mute ourselves before we speak, I apologize. Oh, yay, live shows. But we'll go back to Kirby.
Usually in a query, as long as you answer, character, conflict, and stakes, you're probably going to have at least a halfway decent query. If you can work some world building into that and some voice, that would be spectacular. But as we've all said on Twitter, we don't expect your queries to be perfect right now, but try to hit all those points. In the first pages, mainly voice, which would be character, and the world building, especially since Monica and I are looking for fantasy. The first few pages may not have the conflict evident right away because you're establishing the world and the character, but there should at least be kind of an underlying tension that you know something will happen.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Kirby said. I've interned for 3 different literary agencies, so I worked in a lot of query slush piles, and all of my favorite manuscripts that I pulled from the slush piles had really imperfect queries. So I don't think having a perfect query right now is important. I just think primarily conveying what the conflict of the story is and what's at stake is really important right now. And like Kirby said, also characters. But for me personally, as long as I know what's the conflict and what's at stake, I'll be happy.
Okay, I agree with everyone else. Again, the conflict and stakes I feel are really important. Something I like to see match up with the query that's in the first chapter would be the tone, to make sure that the tone of the first chapter and the book that follows it not only has the promise of the conflict to come and the promise of what other motivation that the main character has, but that it matches what you're querying. Like, if I'm reading a horror query, I want the tone of the first chapter to not feel like an upbeat contemporary chapter. So it has that sort of style that hints at what your genre is, so that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I definitely am gonna everything that everyone just said. I firmly believe in the trifecta of character, conflict, and stakes. But for me, and for what Jamie and I are looking for, I think if you can get that hooky concept in there in your query somewhere, I want to know what is unique about your book. What is unique about your take on fantasy or on space opera? What's going to make me want to pick up your book and say, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, for me, it's the same stuff. Last year, I saw a lot of queries where it was like, okay, this person and this person go and do this thing, and this is what the book's about. And I was like, okay, well, what happens if they don't do this thing? Like, I had no idea what the point was, and that's why stakes are so important. And then also in the first chapters, I really dislike being overloaded with backstory. I feel like if I'm learning more about what happened 10 years ago than what's currently happening, I'm already going to be bored. Backstory has a place, and a lot of times you really do want to put pieces of it in the beginning so you know why all of this is important. But if you start out with like 10 pages of stuff that happened before your story starts, you're probably in the wrong spot.
Awesome. And along those lines, this question has been floating around for a while, asked by multiple people. What are you going to be requesting if you do like something, and should people count themselves out of the race if they haven't heard back from a mentor within 48 hours of submitting their book? Anyone want to jump in on that, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, I would say personally, I'm going to go straight to the full. I want to see the whole thing. I am probably going to request over the entire submission period, so nobody should be concerned if they don't hear. I'd say, probably not the last day or so, but I'm going to be, kind of looking through and considering everything, and I'm probably not going to be a fast requester because I'm really going to want to take my time and think through what I'm the best fit for.
And this year I'm going to be slower too, because last year was my first year mentoring, and I got so excited that I requested a lot of fulls, like more than a summer reading program's amount. And I can't do that this year, even though I loved reading all of your books. They were fabulous. Anyone else want to speak into what they're going to be accepting?
Yeah, so I'm going to do something a little similar. I'm probably only going to be making full requests, maybe 3 to 5, and my goal is to read every single query and pages that come in before I figure out those 3 to 5. So if you do not hear from me right away, it's not a bad thing, and I might even only consider one at a time, and after I finish it and consider it, put it aside and then request my next one. So I might be requesting like right up there to some of the last couple days.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so we have a question about the dreaded synopsis. I know a lot of writers out there are scared of these. Do you guys have any pointers or key things to remember when writing a synopsis? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll go first. I actually sort of like writing them, which I guess makes me the odd one out. So when I'm writing a synopsis, I always go through a lot of different drafts. But I find that making sure I have a good handle of a one-sentence pitch of what each chapter is about helps, because it keeps in mind where your overall arc is going and where the arc for the plot and the characters are going. So you just need to make sure that it hits the main plot. Some of the subplots can get lost. Some of the subplots will get thrown aside. You don't need everything in there. And I always think they need a hint of the emotional arc for the main character. Because while the main arc might be flashy, like, oh, we saved the world, the main character still should probably change, and you might need to show that a little in the synopsis.
Yeah, I actually think that synopses are really good revision tools. They're usually one of the first things that I do once I get done with the first rough draft. I'll go through and do, just like Lindsay said, I'll make a one-sentence summary of what happens in every chapter and then use that to craft the synopsis. And I've definitely found plot holes that way, and I've found logical errors that way. When you boil it down to that most basic level, you can really discover what's at the core of your book and how it's working mechanically. So start out with those one sentences and see what's really going on at the core of your book.
I'd like to jump in and say nobody, save for, I guess, Lindsay, since she's the weird one, nobody likes to write a synopsis. Nobody expects it to be perfect. Everybody struggles with them. Literally, everyone struggles writing a synopsis, so it's fine if yours isn't perfect.
Speaking to that too, I'm terrible at writing them, and I think the first thing I finally had to do to let go to actually write one of these was realize it did not have to sound as entertaining or as awesome as my actual book. It can be like bland. Anyone else want to speak about a synopsis? No, we have a genre-specific question. We have two of them, actually, for the space opera crowd. The first one is from Lindsay Landgraf Hess. What's the key to executing a great space opera, in your opinion? MK, do you want to start us off with that one?
Sure, and I think it depends on kind of where you're going with your space opera, because there are, you know, some subdivisions within that. But for me, what makes a space opera is always going to be the sense of wonder and the sense of adventure. You know, you're flying out amongst the stars. There's the feeling of freedom, and a lot of them have sort of that found family aspect, which I love. You know, Firefly, let's shed a tear really quick. So I think at the core of it, there's sort of an emotional resonance that space opera needs to have. That core of exploration and wonder has to be there for me.
Any other sci-fi people? Try to see who wrote sci-fi down.
I'll answer that. So I love space operas, and one of the things I think that I get pulled into is it's the galaxy, it's the world that you're creating, but in that I'm really drawn to stories that remain true to the character and show the warmth of the people that are living and breathing in this really cold space. So I just wouldn't want to lose that with how big everything, you know, how big it is, to still be able to narrow down and focus about the people and their lives as they are in this extraordinary place. So that's the only thing I'd add. Thanks, Meg.
Great. So the next one, jumping off of that question, is from Revolution. Fantasy mentors, seeing light fantasy on some of your requests. Can you clarify that term? And let's start with Karen. Would you start us off with that one?
Sure. So for me, when I talk about the lighter side, I mean fantasy, science fiction, or magical realism for me personally. That is very character-driven, and it's either set in our world or just like a sidestep off. So it's very realistic fantasy for me. I mean, if I were to say, a comparison, I like the Winter's Kiss kind of fantasy. I am not really the best mentor for a Lord of the Rings kind of fantasy. If there are kind of fantastical creatures in a truly different world, then I'm probably not the right fit for that.
Awesome. And I too wrote light sci-fi and fantasy on my bio, and jumping off of that, it is that like nod toward the fantastical without creating this massive world, because while I enjoy reading the massive worlds, I cannot help you there. I power to you if you can write them. I think they're fantastic. So let's do a question for all of us now. Why did you all want to become mentors? Let's start off with Charlie.
So the reason that I have been at all successful whatsoever is because published professionals were willing to mentor me, and so this is kind of my way to pay it forward. And also, I like reading your guys' stuff. So.
For me, so last year I was a mentee, and I had a wonderful mentor. She's actually on this thread, guys. She's Megan. I learned so much through the process, and my writing just got so much better because I had someone who was challenging me, and I really just want to give that back and put in the time that Megan put into the manuscript to make it the best that it can be. And I just want to work with someone to get their story to be exactly there.
So I was also a mentee 2014, so a couple years ago, and I think it was a great experience as well. It teaches you to work under pressure with deadlines and to learn from feedback and how to implement it and ask questions, and you really kind of go deeper than you would, I think, on your own, and sometimes even with a CP, because there's just so much to learn. I mean, even once you get to the stage where you have an editor, you never stop learning. There's always something to improve your writing, and I think Pitch Wars is just a really great launching point to start developing and improving as an author.
I think for me, I was pretty recently a querying writer. I just got my agent in January, and so I remember knocking on all those doors and they didn't open, and I never knew why, and it can just be so frustrating as a writer. And I know for me it really started to turn around towards the second half of last year when I did start connecting with other writers, and those who had more experience and had had success in getting agented or published it took the time to share that knowledge, kind of review what I had done. It's such a steep learning curve in this industry that I think as much help as you can give somebody it is so appreciated. And, we all need it when we start out. So I just wanted to do the same for somebody that had been done for me.
I kind of have a twofold reason why I wanted to become a mentor. One is that I've actually been a mentee twice, once in 2013, didn't make it in 2014, and then again in 2015. And even though I was in twice, both times I learned so much. And I got critique partners, and I used to be one of those people that thought like, oh, if you're a writer, you have to be solitary and, you have to do it yourself. And now I see that that's total. You need a community of writers around you to help you. And the other reason why is actually from working the slush for an agent and reading manuscripts and seeing work that, like, writers don't realize how much interns really want you to succeed. And sometimes I would see something that I'm like, God, this just needs a little bit of work and it would be amazing, but it's not there enough to request a revise and resubmit, which is where you revise for the agent. So I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to basically read in the slush, but be able to help people a lot more than just passing, which is what you have to do in the inbox.
I wanted to be a Pitch Wars mentor because I got into a few other Brenda Drake contests when I was querying, like Pitch Madness and The Right Voice, which is how I ended up actually getting my agent. And I think that these contests are a really unique opportunity for writers to interact with each other and get mentoring and get in front of agents in a different fashion than just querying. And I love being part of the process, and I think Pitch Wars has one of the best writing communities out there too, so it's really fun to be a part of it.
So, like Kirby, I was in Pitch Wars twice as a mentee, and it's where I met Kirby, who is my critique partner now. And I always wanted to be a mentor after being a mentee because it was what gave me a community of writers when I was surrounded by people who weren't writers, who were great in their own ways, but I didn't have anyone to talk to or know what to do or not to do in a query letter, or don't write that one thing in your manuscript, you'll never get published, you're blacklisted now, goodbye. It gives you that security of knowing that you have someone in your corner, and I wanted to provide that in turn after being welcomed into the community?
So I was also a 2015 Pitch Wars mentee, and it was just such a fabulous experience, and you know, so much emerged from that. The Pitch Wars community has been fantastic. And I just, looking back, I cannot believe how much I have changed as a writer and as a person as a direct result of Pitch Wars. So I really wanted to be able to give that back. Shout out to Sarah Glenn Marsh, my Pitch Wars mentor from last year. But there's also the other side of it is just, I just really like critiquing. It's like a puzzle to me, and I really like digging into a manuscript and being like, ooh, here's the little part that needs to be tweaked, you know, here's the part that's throwing off the pacing. I don't know, it's fun.
Once upon a time, I was an alternate for Pitch Wars. I don't actually remember what year, because it was one of the ones where it was kind of funky and started in December, but the actual contest was the next year. So I think that was 2013. I don't remember. But and it was the same thing. I got introduced to the whole, you know, Pitch Wars family, and it was really fun. And then during a PitMat event later on, I ended up signing with my agent, Mandy, and she was lovely, and she's awesome, and I wanted the opportunity to work with other writers who wanted that same match, you know, with their agents, and I love that process of seeing something that's just not quite right, and then talking back and forth with them, and then being like, oh yeah, this is how we fix it, and then it's exactly what they wanted. I love that process, and I love being a part of that that journey from this is what I have to this is what I want it to be. And that's the most fun thing about all of this.
I love how you guys all, you know, touched on how just great the Pitch Wars community is. I actually, admittedly, before finding the Pitch Wars community in 2014, when I was a mentee, I was afraid of other writers because all the writers I met in real life were mean as hell. Like, they were not supportive people. They were just very competitive and evil. And so I was like, no, I'm never going to show my writing to other writers. They'll just rip me apart or steal it. So Pitch Wars is not those things. It is actually a quite magical group of beautiful unicorns of talent. So if you need to meet other people, this is the place to do that. We are halfway through the show, and so I just want to take a moment to talk about Lindsay's beautiful mug. Lindsay, can you show us your mug? Speak so the camera will go to you.
Oh, hello, Pitch Wars family. Welcome to the Pitch Wars mug show. I lost my joke halfway through.
Yeah, so speaking of how great the community is, as you might have noticed, we are trying to raise money this year to keep the community going and, you know, how just support Pitch Wars, because it's turned into this huge thing that I don't think anyone saw it becoming. And so this year we've teamed up with Writer's Life Apparel, who makes like shirts and mugs for people like us, and they're beautiful. And they've made awesome mugs with the logo on it. Lindsay's actually says the mentor thing on it, right?
Yeah, mine's the mentor one. Mentor's going into battle for you. Holds drinks excellently. Does all of its intended purposes and looks really cool.
Mine's just the logo on it, and there's shirts, there's going to be more designs released August 3rd. I heard through the grapevine there might be one that says Pitch Warrior on it, which I think sounds freaking fantastic. So if you do go over there, all proceeds, well, 30% of the proceeds, don't know why I said all, 30% will go towards supporting us. So go check that out. We do have more questions. If you're just joining in now or late, shoot them over to us on Twitter through #AskMentor, and we will try to get to as many as we can live. And if not, we will answer them later. This one is from Ari N. Faye. Well, it just disappeared. And it says, I'm in a little late, so I hope this hasn't already been answered, but will you help us with comp titles? And going off on that, do you think everything needs a comp title when you're reading queries? Anyone have any strong opinions on this?
I think that comp titles definitely are really helpful. They're the most helpful for selling it, especially to editors. But of course, we'll help with comp titles. I'm sure all of us very well-read people can come up with something. I've struggled with them in the past too. So any help you give me a comp title, I'll give you a comp title. How's that?
I will say that not having comp titles can't hurt you, but having ones that don't accurately represent your manuscript can. Because they can set expectations in a different direction.
So then would you say that if you're struggling to find comp titles, it's better to leave them out than reach too far?
Yeah. I mean, I would. I don't know if anyone else would agree with me. But
I would agree.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not a necessity like other things are. Like, we need to know that your book has a main character. You do not need to know if it has a comp title.
That is a good point. Turns out I just found out from Limar, our Twitter captain, that we have tons of questions right now. The question we got from Angela: tropes. What are your guilty pleasures and the ones you can't stand? Let's start with Kirby.
Oh God, guilty pleasures. Probably romance where it's like an older person and a younger person, like teacher type relationship.
Yes.
I know who you're talking about.
Oh yeah, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Spoilers.
There, you guys.
But yeah, that was just the first thing I thought of because I was like, oh my God. What was the next part? The guilty pleasures and what else?
Ones you can't stand.
Like guilty pleasures I can't stand, or just things in books I can't stand?
Tropes.
Oh, tropes. I mean, besides the usual fantasy tropes, like white dude goes on a mission to do a thing, and he does the thing successfully. I don't know. I feel like most tropes, there's a way to make it fresh. Like there's a way to twist it. Like that's kind of my philosophy. Is there's almost always a way to take a trope and breathe some life into it. So I've already said this on Twitter before, but basically is anything that a trope that like falls into erasing diversity, like I said, white dude goes on a fantasy mission to do the thing. That's something that I can't stand.
I will say I have 0 guilty pleasures because that requires feeling guilty, and I have no shame. I love all of my things wholeheartedly. I read and write fan fiction. So, yeah. And as far as things I can't stand, I'm going to second the things that erase diversity in any way. Can't stand that. Also, just really, I can't do the insta-love. You know, anything where, you know, I can do insta-lust. I can do, you know, any kind of immediate connection. But, like, by the end of book 1, we must be married. I just can't. Sorry.
Anything else you guys love or love to hate?
I'm really not a fan of princesses with magical powers that they just discovered. That drives me crazy. Like, how can you be, you know, 18 years old and you're just now having this major life thing? Like, I can't do the princesses with the magical life force coming out of them. That drives me nuts.
I would say the trope, like one trope that I really hate is we hate each other up until we love each other. When you have couples that start out as enemies, I don't know, I'm not a fan. And then I know I'm going to turn half the fantasy community against me, but I hate elves and fairies and fae and most dragons. So if you have the classic fantasy creatures in your book, we're not going to get along. But I think you're great.
One trope that drives me nuts, and they're done so well sometimes, so I'm not saying that they aren't. Like, I love some of these books, but I just don't want to see it this time, is teenagers who are the chosen one to save everyone. I don't know why not the kid down the street? Like, why is this teenager the one sometimes? And I don't know. Why can't an adult be the chosen one? I mean, given it's why. Anyway, that's my mini tangent. We just got an anonymous question. This one says, if a mentor chose a mentee and learned that the person they chose is really young, would that matter? I am 9 days shy of 16 and submitting to the contest.
The guy who finished Aragorn was like, what, 15, so I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it either. One of the most talented writers I know, she's just 16. I don't think age really matters when it comes to writing abilities.
Do you think they should mention their age in their query, or see if they get chosen without their age mentioned?
I wouldn't mention it.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, the biggest issue I've ever had with publishing isn't like, oh, I'm a woman, or oh, I'm this or that. It's, oh, I'm young. So, like, some people will kind of judge you for it, so I wouldn't mention it.
And I will say to our anonymous asker, I actually got a question similar to this the other day, and that person was 13, and they're planning on subbing too. And I think the younger the better. If you can write a book at 16, 13, 15, wow, send it on up. I'd love to read it. I think that's fantastic.
Y'all are hardcore. Props to you.
Yeah, I didn't write my first book till I was, like, out of college, because I didn't actually think I could write a book in college. But anyway, in a synopsis, another synopsis question, everyone. This one is from Breck L. and Heidi Neal. Apparently they asked the same question. In a synopsis, if your MS is part of a series, how much of the overall plot arc should you include?
I would say just the book you're submitting.
I think unless, I mean, in general, the book you're submitting should have a closed arc, and the synopsis should reflect that. But I mean, if you want, you can, like, leave it a little open. Like, they've saved the day, but thing they messed up over here is rising on the horizon. It should be the closed arc of the one book.
So on that note, what do you think about cliffhangers in the book people are submitting?
I would want to see a full arc come to a close. I'm okay if there is unanswered questions and some loose ends that would then go into a second book, but I would love for the book to be able to stand by itself.
I feel like it has to do with execution. I would largely like the book to have a full arc that closes at the end, but at the same time, if it's something like The Daughter of Smoke and Bones, I feel like the start of that, or the first book in that series, had a certain, this is my dog, he's being really annoying right now, had a really full arc, but it still ended on a cliffhanger, and I didn't mind that so much.
I think it works when it, like, emotionally closes the arc too, because the Daughter of Smoke and Bones books did close the emotional arc. You had that release at the end where you're like, I can put this book down now, even though I know things are still to come. But books that don't do that, you're sort of left hanging in an uncomfortable way.
Anyone else? Okay, so we have one from Remy Gallant. Do you creep on the Mentee blog hop? And what information do you want us to include in our blogs?
I do. And, you know, I really like to hear about the book. I mean, I love, you know, the personal information. I do like getting to know people a little bit. But, you know, the big reason I'm there is to see if your book is a fit for my wish list. So I love, it doesn't have to be a lot of details, just a concise summary of your genre and some of the major plot points are really helpful.
I definitely do read the blogs because it's my first year mentoring, so I'm really excited about it. So I'm going out there and seeing, like, what all's there. Mainly, like Karen said, including what your book's about. I do love hearing about, like, how you wrote the book and, like, maybe there's backstory in your personal life. But it is kind of frustrating, though, like, when I'll kind of, you feel like you're getting to know the person as you're reading their blog, and you're like, they list their interest and you're like, yes, keep going, and then you get down to the bottom and it's like, I'm submitting a YA contemporary, and I'm like, no, so close. So
I think I'll contradict a little bit. I definitely pop into the blogs once in a while. I don't, like, actively go stalking for them a lot of the time, though. I'm going to say, yet again, if you have one, pin it to the top of your, you know, tweets. But I like to see the more personal information. I like to see, like, what kinds of books and movies do you like to read? Are you in any fandoms? Do you have any major hobbies? Because I think, for me at least, all of those things really feed into my writing. So I guess I kind of see that as like what your influences are, and I like seeing that and then seeing some information about the book so I can sort of see how it ties together as a package.
I have to admit, I actually haven't read any. And that's not because I don't want to. It's because I am so afraid I'll fall in love with you and you won't submit to me. So I will read the blogs after people submit to me because I just know it'll be like high school and I'll be like, oh, that person's so dreamy. And they'll never ask me to prom. Submit me
I'm
a
the
book
same
like that. I
way.
love those.
I'm the same way. I'll peek beforehand every once in a while, but otherwise I wait until I'm like, oh my god, I love this submission, and then I go looking for it.
Yeah, no, that's like the first thing I look for if I like a person. As I'm waiting for them to send me the full, I'll be like, let me go stalk you right now. Anyone else want to talk about the block hop?
I just want to throw in that I'm kind of different. I don't read any of your stuff except for what you send me. I don't care who you are or what you like or what you eat for breakfast in the morning. If your book's good, then we'll make it work. So that's all I care about.
Awesome. We got a writing question. This one sounds really interesting. It's from Lucille Lance. How do we bring a character to life? Where do I bring in his personality? And I know that's a lot of question for something like this, but if anyone has like a cool tip they want to throw in writing wise.
So one thing that I try to do in every chapter to try to make it as layered and complex as possible is I like to introduce 1 to 3 new threads, teach the reader 1 to 3 new things about my main character, and then a couple things about secondary characters. And then it kind of builds from chapter to chapter. So by the time a couple chapters in, you have pretty complex, and you're really starting to see the characterization and what's going on with all the characters.
I'll add that that's really good advice, and I like to keep in mind, or just for writing, even though this wouldn't hold true in real life at all, I like to give specific actions or vocal qualities or phrases to one specific character, so that when a character makes a small movement or has a certain cadence when they're speaking in dialogue, that it's unique to them.
When I was a mentee, my mentor, Rachel Lynn Solomon, who's awesome, submit to her and go research her. She's fabulous as well, as all of these people are. Honestly, I would say submit to all of them. But the tip she gave me, which is something I didn't consider, was give them a hobby. Which, I mean, was like, oh, wow, real people have hobbies and, like, unrelated things. And so we ended up having this entire sub-thing about how my main character used to be a color guard flag thrower. And it really added to the plot, and it brought out all these parts of her personality that I just hadn't even explored yet. Little details like that can go a long way, in my opinion. Anyone else want to speak on personalities of characters?
I just want to say I agree with what you just said there, Nikki. And one of the things I did for my last book was character worksheets, and it felt a little bit like homework. I'm filling out all these blanks, and sometimes it was boring, and sometimes it didn't really add anything. But just going through the exercise and thinking through like a real 3-dimensional person, what did they eat, what's their family like, all those little things, they did add up, and I did find myself going back to that and kind of pulling when I needed to deepen somebody, especially because I did have these 4 points of view and they really had to be distinct. So they did need hobbies, and they needed, a certain way of speaking, and they needed very specific families. So that helped me.
One thing I'd like to add is sometimes it's not just what that character does. My cat is plucking behind me. Sometimes it's not just what that character does, it's how the other characters interact with them. Like if the last book that I had in Pitch Wars, there was a character that, for spoiler reasons, is not in the book for the majority of the book, but you know about her through what other people say about her. And sometimes that can build a character up a lot just based on what other characters have to say about that person.
Yeah, I'll just add, you really don't want to ignore the secondary characters. They can bring your main character to life so much more. My CPs actually for my book would say that they couldn't wait until the one character Blanche was in scene because she just like brought everything to life. I mean, she, in a not annoying way, spoke about herself in third person, and she named her car, and she just had nicknames for people, and her being so alive on the scene really then made my main character come to life because she's reacting to everything that the secondary character was doing.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying, it's probably been around 5 minutes, I don't know what I'm talking about. The one where all of your side characters should be the main character of their own novel. They should all have their own motivations, their own hobbies, their own things happening. They should still be side characters in the novel you're writing.
Awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
I think my own critic partners would probably be really tired of hearing this, but as far as expressing a character's personality to the reader, I always try to think of it on 3 levels. Like, there's the purely external stuff that any character can see. They're tapping their foot, they're holding their arms, they're sighing. Then there's the internal things that the character is feeling, whether their stomach is churning or their heart's pounding against their ribs. And then there's the way they're talking to themselves inside their head. How are they thinking about themselves, and how are they, like, what's their self-talk like? And so I think all of those combined can give the reader a really clear impression of who that character is from the inside.
Awesome. These are all great answers, and this, I mean, pure example of how you guys are all wise and full of sage advice, and this is why you need to submit to these people, Pitch Wars hopefuls. Okay, so we are coming up on the end of the hour, and usually I would go straight to my final question, but we did just get one that I think is really good, so I'm going to try to squeeze it in, because I think it's important. This one's from Jacqueline Bach. Are you guys open to helping with bigger changes if needed? For example, if, say, an ending needed to be changed to feel more solid. I see a lot of nods, but basically the answer is yes. I don't think there's any... I mean, that's what Pitch Wars is. If your book is perfect, we wouldn't accept it anyway. I think I saw, Kim, did you say you wanted to...
Yeah. I took on 2 mentees last year, and both of them had major changes. Huge structural changes for one of them, and then the other one completely took out a point of view and had to rewrite all of that. So both of them had major changes to do, and like you said, I think we all expect a lot of work going into it, and I think it's important that mentees know that it's going to be a lot of work. We're going to ask you for probably big things to do, so just be prepared.
And I've talked about this before, like on my own vlogs, but when I was a mentee, I had to delete 2 characters. Like, one got absorbed partially into the mother, but generally went away forever, and then the other one was like combined equally into a new character with 2. It was a lot, and you know what? My book was better because of it, even though it was very painful to do. Anyone else want to talk about big changes?
Yeah, actually, Isabel knows about this. I pretty much looked at her book and I was like, yeah, you see this whole middle part? Yeah, we're changing all this middle part. And she was like, oh my God. But at the end, you know, going through the whole process, she was really happy with the result, I think. So.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that. The middle part of my book was a hot mess. And I didn't realize how bad it was until Megan said, oh no, this all has to go. So as long as you are willing to work for it, it will be so much better. You will feel so proud that you got to the heart of the story, that you got to peel back everything and get to the crux of what you're trying to say. So the biggest thing is, yes, totally game to making big changes, because the end goal is to make your book the best that it needs to be.
I think, you know, if we have big changes for your book, I think that means we connect with it and have, we want to share your vision. And that's the biggest thing, is bringing your vision to life in a way maybe you didn't see before. Anyone else before we go on to the last question? Okay, so I know everyone's dying to know this. What is your one piece of advice for writers trying to make it? And we're going to start with Lindsay.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Have an answer to this question before you become a Pitch Wars mentor is my one piece of advice. To keep going. Things are going to be tough, and they're going to suck, and they may suck for a long time. And there might not be a lot you can do about it, and it might feel like the literal worst. But you're not alone. Other people have gone through it. And I'm sure there's someone out there who would be more than happy to help you continue to get through it and come out on the other side.
So I'm sure others are going to talk about the importance of learning to accept critiques. And so I'm going to skip that and say take care of your mind and body throughout the entire process, during pitch wars and just as a writer in general, because you know, it can take a toll on you going through this whole process mentally, but also just, you know, you gotta care for yourself physically. Like don't do this. This sucks. You know, this was a 16,000 word writing binge over the course of 3 days. It wasn't smart. Don't do that. You know, pace yourself and really listen to your body when it's saying I've had enough.
Be open to any and all feedback. I mean, obviously, look at it, and if someone's like, you know, your book sucks, stop writing, don't talk to that person. Go get away from that person and find someone better. But so much of your book lives in your head, and not all of that makes it out when you're writing. And so the more feedback you get, the more of those comments you get from, you know, beta readers or critique partners that are like, well, why do they do this? And you're like, well, because of this. Okay, well, why isn't that in the chapter? Holy crap, I forgot that. And that's the stuff that kind of makes everything make sense. And so the more feedback you get, the more of that comes out of your head and, you know, winds up in all of your pages and makes it easier for everyone else to kind of connect with your characters.
I'm going to share two. One is never stop trying to learn. Even after you finally jump that fence and you're published, there's still stuff you need to know. There are big-time authors out there who still have stuff to learn. So still go to the conferences, still take classes, still read books. There's so much. You're never going to stop learning. And I would say the other one, I usually tell people to do a daily word count, but if you're already able to finish a book, I would recommend writing the pitch for a book you have before you write the book, because it will give you a little bit more direction and maybe save you some revising time later.
I think something that I realized was rejection is part of the game. So rejection exists at the querying level. It also exists when you're on the submission level. It's just part of the game, and it happens to everybody. You are not alone in that. And I think learning how to cope with rejection, because at times it just feels so intensely personal, it's not. And if you learn how to motivate yourself during that time and start a new project or work on something or develop that character and like make that better, it will be so much easier as the rejections do come in, because they will come in. They come in for everybody.
I think you're still muted.
You're
Jenny.
muted.
There we go. Okay. One of the cool things about, I guess, the writing world is that over time these friendships grow organically, and I think having those book friends is so important just for an outlet. I mean, I complain to my husband and my mom, and I see their eyes glazing over, and I don't really talk to like non-book friends about things because all of a sudden they have like a family emergency and they're gone. So I think having those book friends are so important, and just to share experiences with and compare notes, not in a competitive way, because I think we all have our very different journeys and what have you, but just to be like, hey, what happened to you? This is what's happening with me, and just to connect on that level. I mean, I know just from this group, like Isabel and I have gotten really close, and you know, it kind of starts from tweeting to direct messages, and now we text, and you know, so it's a really important thing to have.
I think everyone has already said such great things about connecting and not taking rejection personally, and I agree with all that. I will take a slightly different tack. I would just talk about treating writing as a business. You know, I mean, it's such a creative endeavor, and so much of it is your imagination, and so much of it is like that sort of personal passion that you have for your story. But your agent is your business partner. They are going to play a huge role in your career. So spend as much time researching the right person for you as you would your story, and research the market, research the kind of imprints that you'd like to work with, and just kind of shore up that business side of things as well, so that when the doors start opening for you, you're ready to make the right decision for your career.
I'm going to piggyback off of what a lot of you have already said, which is this, that you just need to persevere. You just have to keep going. But part of that is finding a community for yourself, because if you have writing friends, it really, really helps with the rejections, because you can. It's better to yell at one of your writing friends, like, of course they don't understand my genius work, instead of going to Twitter and making a mistake like that and publicly saying something like that. For instance, Lindsay and I we started out as critique partners, and I now count her as one of my closest friends. Sappy moment. And the other bit of advice I would give is you need to take risk. Like when I entered Pitch Wars in 2013, I literally found out what it was the day before, and I paced my house for almost a full 24 hours wondering if I should do it. And I did it, and I got in, and it was the best decision of my life. So sometimes you just have to risk it like a biscuit, and maybe you'll get in.
Yeah, I guess my writing advice piggybacks on what Isabel said about rejection, and just accepting that rejection doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. Rejection doesn't mean you have a bad book or anything like that. Being successful in publishing is really 50% perseverance and 50% luck. It's just about getting your book out there at the right time, or getting whatever you're writing out to the right person at the right time. So if you get rejected by one of the mentors even, it could just be timing. It's not the right time for us to take on the book. It's not the right time for the book to be out there yet. It doesn't mean you're not great still.
Those are all wonderful pieces of advice, and I just want to add, no matter what happens once the Pitch Wars mentees are chosen, I mean, obviously on Twitter you all are like really drawn to this community, and so I want to encourage you all, don't leave it if it doesn't work out, because there's still great people for you to connect with, and a lot of the mentors will always be there to answer questions. We love helping people, and I just gotta say, you all tonight, like, you guys are amazing, and I'm so glad you're part of my Pitch Wars community, and I'm glad I've gotten to meet you through this amazing contest through Brenda Drake. So thank you for that, and for joining us tonight with these awesome pieces of wisdom. I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope you did too. And if you guys out there have any more questions, again, just shoot them over Twitter. We're done for the night, but we'll try to answer as many as we can. And good luck, everyone. May the pitch be with you. And remember, there are more live shows leading up until submission window opens August 3rd. It's exciting times, y'all. So thanks again, and have a good night. May the pitch be with you.